There's a particular kind of shame that lives in the chest. Not loud, not dramatic, just quietly heavy. Like a stone you carry so long you forget it's there. I didn't expect to feel it the moment I pulled into my mother's driveway. I expected relief, maybe. The kind that comes when you collapse into something familiar after a long time away. I'd been gone for 3 years, grad school in Portland, a thesis on urban sociology, 2 failed situationships, and exactly 1 identity crisis that I never told anyone about. My name is Eli Carson. I was 24 years old, freshly graduated, broken the way that only overeducated people manage to be, and I had come home to Cedar Falls, Ohio. Because I had nowhere else to go, and because my mother had called me 6 times in 1 week, saying she had big news. The house looked the same. Yellow siding, black shutters, the oak tree in the front yard that had grown so tall it now shaded the entire porch. But there was something different. A truck in the driveway. Dark green, clean, not my mother's silver. Sedan. I sat in my car for a moment longer than necessary. The front door opened before I even got out. Eli. My mother, Sandra Carson, 52 years old, and somehow more radiant than I remembered, came down the porch steps in a floral sundress, her silver-streaked hair loose around her shoulders. She looked happy. Not the polite, managed happiness I'd seen from her in the years after the divorce. Something realer. Something lit from inside. I barely had time to stand before she had her arms around me. "You're skinny," she said, pulling back to examine me like I was a plant she'd been worried about. "Are you eating?" "I eat constantly," I said. "Hi, Mom." She cupped my face in both hands the way she'd been doing since I was 6, and for one brief moment, every complicated thing in my life dissolved. "Come inside," she said. "There's someone I want you to meet." I'd known, of course, about the someone. She'd mentioned him in passing over FaceTime, a man I've been spending time with, and I had been happy for her. Genuinely in the abstract. Distanced way you can be happy for someone when the news doesn't yet have a face or a name, or a pair of hands that are currently standing at her kitchen counter slicing tomatoes. He was tall. That was the first thing I noticed. Broad-shouldered in a way that filled the doorway between the kitchen and the living room when he turned around. He was maybe mid to late 30s, dark-skinned, with close-cropped hair just beginning to gray at the temples, and eyes that were brown and steady and immediately, disconcertingly kind. "Eli," my mother said, her voice full of something I can only describe as pride, "this is Marcus. Marcus Webb." Marcus smiled and extended his hand. "I've heard a lot about you." His grip was firm. Not aggressive, just solid. Present. The kind of handshake that tells you a person is comfortable in their own skin.
"Good things."
"I hope," I said, "because it was what you say." "Mostly," he said. And there was a small, warm humor in his eyes that told me he was teasing, and that he was the kind of person who teased gently. My mother floated back to the stove, narrating the dinner she was making, already slipping into the easy rhythm of a woman in her own home with 2 people she cared about. I stood in the kitchen doorway and watched Marcus return to the cutting board, and I thought, okay, he seems nice. This is fine. This is normal. I was wrong about the fine part. Not right away. Not that night. That night was genuinely easy. My mother made her famous lemon chicken. Marcus turned out to be an architect who worked for a small firm in Columbus and drove out to Cedar Falls on weekends, and the 3 of us sat at the kitchen table for 2 hours talking about everything from urban planning to whether the Ohio State Fair was worth attending. Marcus was funny without trying to be. He listened when other people talked, which is rarer than it should be. He refilled my mother's wine glass before she asked. He was, by every measure, a good man. I went to bed that night feeling cautiously optimistic. I did not sleep well. I told myself the restlessness was just readjustment. Coming home after 3 years has a particular disorientation to it, the familiar made strange by time. The way your old bedroom feels like a museum of a person you used to be. My high school track trophies on the shelf, a poster for a band I no longer listened to, a version of myself I had mostly shed, like a second skin. What I hadn't fully shed, or rather, What I'd spent 3 years in Portland, quietly excavating and then carefully burying again, was the truth about myself I had known since I was 17. Maybe earlier. I had dated girls in high school with genuine affection and complete emotional unavailability, which in retrospect says everything. In college, I had kissed a man at a party and spent 6 weeks afterward telling myself it was the alcohol. In grad school, I had finally, privately, in the pages of a journal I kept locked in a drawer, admitted the truth. I was gay. I liked men. I had always liked men. Everything else had been performance, or confusion, or fear. I hadn't told my mother. I hadn't told anyone. Cedar Falls was not an unfriendly place. But it was a small place, and small places have a particular weight on the shoulders of people who are different in quiet ways. I kept telling myself I'd tell her. Next visit. Next phone call. Next year had a way of becoming never. And now here I was, back in my childhood home. And my mother's boyfriend was sleeping in the guest room down the hall. He stayed weekends, she'd explained. They'd been together 8 months, and I lay in my old bed staring at the ceiling and thinking about the steadiness of his hands and the particular quality of his laugh and... Absolutely not. No, this is not happening. But the heart is not a particularly deviant organ. The first real moment, the moment I would return to later. Turning it over like a stone to see what lived underneath happened on a Saturday morning. 3 days after I arrived, I came downstairs early, before my mother was up. The house was quiet and golden with morning light. I'd assumed I'd have the kitchen to myself. Instead, Marcus was already there, sitting at the kitchen table with a cup of coffee and a set of architectural blueprints spread out before him, pencil tucked behind his ear, completely absorbed. He didn't hear me come in. I stood in the doorway for longer than was reasonable, watching him work. There was something in the quality of his concentration, the way he leaned forward, the slight furrow between his brows, the way his lips moved almost imperceptibly as he read, that made my chest do something inconvenient. Then he looked up and caught me watching. He didn't make it weird. He just smiled easy, unhurried, and said, "Coffee's fresh." "Thanks," I said, and went to pour myself a cup, and told myself very firmly that I was a grown adult with a graduate degree and a functional moral compass, and I was not going to develop feelings for my mother's boyfriend. "You're up early," he said. When I sat down across from him, "Old habit from track," I said. "Body still thinks it needs to run at 6 a.m. "Do you still run?" "Sometimes. When life isn't trying to kill me." I nodded at his blueprints. "What's that?" His face changed slightly when I asked. Not dramatically, but there was a loosening, a warmth. "Community center in Columbus? Low-income neighborhood. They've been trying to get this built for about 12 years. We just got the funding." He turned the blueprint around so I could see it. "I've been working on it for 2 years. I leaned in to look. It was beautiful, even in blueprint form. Open, airy, a design that felt intentional and generous. "This is the gym?" "Right there. And that's the after-school space. I wanted natural light in there specifically. Kids concentrate better with natural light." He pointed with his pencil. "This is the community kitchen. The idea is to make the whole building feel like it belongs to the people using it, not like an institution they're being let into." I looked at him. "You care about this a lot." He looked back. "Yes," he said simply. "I do." There was a pause, brief, charged with something I couldn't fully name. Then my mother's footsteps on the stairs, and we both looked away. And the moment folded back into ordinary morning. But I held it. I kept it. I shouldn't have. The weeks that followed were a careful dance. I was job hunting. I had 2 interviews with nonprofits in Columbus and one with a research firm, which meant I was home more than I'd expected. With time moving slowly and softly, and Marcus was around most weekends and sometimes a Wednesday or Thursday when his firm let him work remotely, we fell into an accidental rhythm. The way you do with someone you share space with. Coffee in the morning. Occasional parallel work sessions at the dining room table. He would sometimes ask about my research, and I would sometimes ask about his buildings. And the conversations would stretch longer than either of us planned, I learned. Things about him, the way you learn things about someone when you're paying close attention and trying not to look like you're paying close attention. He had grown up in Atlanta. He'd gotten a scholarship to study architecture at Georgia Tech and had worked his way to where he was entirely on his own terms. He was quiet about his past in a way that wasn't guarded so much as considered he chose what he shared, and what he shared was given with intention. He had a younger sister he was close to. He volunteered 2 Saturdays a month with a youth mentorship program. He was reading a biography of James Baldwin that he kept on the kitchen counter and picked up in the spaces between other things. That last detail lodged in my chest like a splinter. I couldn't reach. One afternoon, my mother was at her book club, and I was at the table with my laptop. And Marcus was at the counter with his coffee and his book. He looked up and said, out of nowhere, "Can I ask you something?" "Sure," I said, with the careful casualness of someone who is not, absolutely not, cataloging every interaction with this person for later. "You seem like you're carrying something," he said. It's not accusatory, not probing, just honest, the way he was about most things. "You don't have to tell me what it is, but I notice it sometimes." The blood went to my face. What one terrible second. I thought somehow he knew. Somehow he had seen through the carefully managed surface of my behavior and understood. Exactly why I sometimes looked away too quickly or talked too fast when it was just the two of us in a room. But he continued more gently. "Starting over after school is hard. Being back home when you thought you'd be somewhere else. I know what that feels like." The relief was so intense I almost laughed. I settled for something honest, but safe. "Yeah," I said. "I thought I'd have more figured out by now." "Most people do," he said. "At your age, I was certain I was failing." He paused, looking at the cover of his book. "Turns out I was just becoming something, just couldn't see it yet." I looked at him for a moment. "Did you always know you wanted to be an architect?" I asked. "No," he said. "I always knew I wanted to build things that mattered. The architecture came later. The want came first." He looked at me steadily. "What do you want, Eli? Not what you're supposed to want. What do you want?" The question sat between us like an open door. I didn't answer it. Said something deflecting about the nonprofit interviews, and the conversation moved on. Marcus let it move on, because he was the kind of man who asked questions and then gave you room to decide whether to answer them. But I thought about it for the rest of the day. What do you want? I wanted to not be lying to my mother. I wanted to not be falling in love with the wrong person. It was a Tuesday in late August, and a thunderstorm had been building over Cedar Falls. All afternoon, the kind of summer storm that comes in low and purple and turns the air electric before it breaks. My mother had gone to dinner with a colleague and wasn't expected back until 9. I had been sitting on the back porch watching the storm approach when Marcus came out with 2 glasses of iced tea, set one beside me without asking if I wanted it. We sat in the growing dark and watched the lightning thread across the sky over the fields at the edge of town. "I have to tell you something," I said. The words surprised me. I hadn't planned them. They simply came out, the way words sometimes do when a storm is building and the ordinary rules of conversation seem less urgent. Marcus turned to look at me, patient, open.
Yes.
It was the first time I had ever said those words out loud to another human being. My voice was completely steady, which surprised me because my hands were not. Marcus didn't say anything right away. He looked at me for a long moment, and what I saw in his expression was not shock, not discomfort, not the reflexive scramble to say the right thing. It was simply recognition. It's like a person who has heard a thing they already knew, finally confirmed. "Thank you for telling me," he said. 3 words. It's the simplest possible response. And somehow precisely right. "My mother doesn't know," I said. "I figured." He turned back to the storm. "She loves you very much. It's that part of her it won't change." "I know," I said. "I know it won't. I stopped, looked at my hands. I've been carrying this for a long time, and I'm tired of carrying it." "Then put it down," he said quietly. The rain came then, sudden and heavy, rattling the porch roof, filling the air with the smell of wet earth. We sat in it, not in the rain, but in the sound of it, in the shelter of the covered porch, and something shifted in me. Something put down. I didn't tell him the rest. I didn't say, and the reason it's gotten harder to carry lately is partly because of you. I wasn't brave enough for that. Not yet. Maybe not ever. But I had said the real thing, and he had received it without flinching. And when my mother came home at 9:15 and the three of us watched a documentary about national parks in the living room, I sat in the corner of the couch and felt, for the first time in a very long time, like a person who was not entirely at war with himself. September arrived, and with it, a job offer from a nonprofit in Columbus, a research position, meaningful work, good people. Accepted it. I gave myself 2 more weeks at home before I'd have to find an apartment and start over in a new old city. 2 weeks, I told myself. I would spend them doing all the things I'd been avoiding. Telling my mother the truth, detaching myself from the quiet gravity of Marcus Webb, who was not mine and never could be, and who I had no business looking at the way I looked at him. I told my mother on a Sunday morning over coffee at the kitchen table. I had rehearsed it 100 times. What came out was 3 sentences. Mom, I'm gay. Known for a long time, and I'm sorry it took me this long to say it. She set down her coffee cup. She looked at me, and then Sandra Carson, who had carried her own grief quietly and raised me mostly alone and danced in the kitchen when she thought no one was watching, put her hand over mine and said, "Oh, baby, I know." I stared at her. "Known for years," she said softly. "I was waiting for you to be ready." She squeezed my hand. "I love you exactly as you are. I have never loved you any other way," I cried. I am not embarrassed to admit it. I put my head on the kitchen table like I was 12 years old, and I cried, in a way that felt like something coming loose that had been bolted down for too long. And my mother rubbed my back and made soft sounds and refilled my coffee when I finally sat up again. "Does Marcus know?" she asked after a while. "I told him," I said. "A few weeks ago." She nodded slowly. "He's a good man, is," he said. She looked at me carefully in the particular way that mothers look at their children, when they are reading more than words. I held very still under that look. "Eli," she said. "Mom," I said. Silence. Double quotes. "Nothing happened," I said. "I know," she said. Another silence. "But something could have happened," she said. Not angry, not accusing, the way she always had. I couldn't lie to her. Not after everything. Not after the long silence I had only just put down. "I don't know," I said, which was honest. "I don't. I would never. I haven't, and I won't." I looked at her. "He loves you." She was quiet for a long time. She looked out the window at the oak tree, the last of the summer light coming through the yellow leaves. "He does," she said, "and I love him." She turned back to me. "But I also know that Marcus and I are in different places. He's told me that honestly. We care for each other very much, and what we have is real, and I don't know where it's going." She paused. "That's a conversation between Marcus and me, not you and me. I'm not asking you to, I know." She squeezed my hand again. "No, you're not. I just want you to know that I see you, all of you. And whatever happens, I need us to be honest with each other." She looked at me steadily. "Can we do that?" "Yes," I said. "Yes, absolutely yes." She nodded. She picked up her coffee. "Good." A pause. "He mentioned you, you know. Said you were one of the most quietly thoughtful people he'd met." A small smile. "He's not wrong." I didn't know what to do with that, so I just held it, the way I'd been holding things for too long. Except this time, the weight of it felt different. Not like a secret. Like a question waiting for the right moment to be answered. Marcus came over that Thursday, the last Thursday before I was due to leave for Columbus. My mother had told me the night before, as quietly and without drama, that she and Marcus had talked. That they cared for each other and always would. That they had agreed together that what they had was a beautiful chapter that was finding its natural ending, not in pain, not in betrayal, but in the kind of honest reckoning that 2 decent people can reach when they choose truth over comfort. She said it the way someone says something they've already made peace with. She said it looking out the window at the oak tree with a small, real smile. "Are you okay?" I asked. "I'm sad," she said, "but I'm okay. They're not the same thing." I nodded. "And I want you to talk to him," she said. "Mom, not for me, for yourself. She looked at me. You've spent a very long time not saying things. I'm asking you to stop doing that. Marcus arrived at 4 in the afternoon. My mother, with the grace that I would spend the rest of my life trying to learn from, announced that she was going to her sister's for dinner and would be back late. She hugged Marcus at the door. A long hug, warm, real. The kind that contains its own goodbye. And then she hugged me. And then she left, and I heard her car pull out of the driveway. Marcus stood in the kitchen doorway. I was at the table. He looked at me. She told you, he said. She told me, I said. He came and sat down across from me. For a long moment, neither of us said anything. Outside, the oak tree moved in a light wind, and a car passed on the street, and the house was very quiet. I owe you an apology, I said. He frowned slightly. For what? For whatever this has been? On my end, I kept my eyes on the table. You were with my mother. You were good to her. You've been nothing but... I stopped. Started again. I didn't intend to feel the things I felt. I know that doesn't fix anything. You don't need to apologize for feelings, he said. I know, but I need to say this anyway. I looked up.